There are rare moments in history when a single human encounter changes not only two lives, but also the spiritual imagination of humanity itself. Before meeting Shams of Tabriz, Jalāl al-Dīn Rūmī was already respected throughout the Islamic world as a scholar, jurist, and teacher. Thousands admired him. Students followed him everywhere. His lectures filled the madrasa halls of Konya. But after Shams entered his life, Rumi changed completely. The scholar became a mystic, the intellectual became a poet of the heart, and the man who once searched for truth in books began searching for it within divine love itself. What happened between Rumi and Shams al-Din Tabrizi was not a teacher-student relationship. It was a collision between intellect and awakening, between knowledge and experience, between certainty and surrender. And from that collision emerged one of the greatest spiritual voices in human history. Konya, in the middle of the 13th century, stood at the crossroads of civilizations. Caravans entered the city from Persia, Syria, Baghdad, and Central Asia. Merchants filled the bazaars with silk, spices, books, and precious metals. Scholars debated theology beneath stone archways illuminated by oil lamps. Students crowded the madrasas, searching for wisdom and status. And among them all stood one man whose reputation had spread far beyond Anatolia, Rumi. He was admired everywhere he went. Students gathered around him in the streets. Nobles sought his advice. His lectures on theology and law attracted listeners from distant cities. He had inherited knowledge from generations of scholars and mastered nearly every discipline of religious learning. Outwardly, his life appeared complete, but beneath the respect and admiration, something restless lived inside him, a longing without a name. Then, one autumn afternoon, a wandering dervish entered Konya. He wore a dark cloak worn thin by years of travel. Dust covered his boots. His face carried intensity rather than refinement, and his eyes seemed strangely alive, as though they were fixed on something invisible to everyone else. This was Shams of Tabriz. Unlike the scholars of Konya, Shams cared nothing for reputation, titles, or recognition. He wandered from city to city, searching not for followers, but for one soul capable of understanding him. When Shams first saw Rumi speaking publicly near the marketplace, he stopped and watched from a distance. The respected scholar surrounded by admirers, the polished intellectual speaking with confidence and precision. But Shams saw something hidden beneath the surface: longing. After the crowd slowly dispersed, Shams approached him quietly. "Do you remember me?" Rumi studied the stranger carefully. "No," he replied gently. "My name is Shamsuddin of Tabriz," the dervish said. "Some call me Parande, the bird." Rumi smiled faintly. "And why do they call you the bird?" "Because I do not remain in one place very long." "And why do you wander so much?" Shams looked directly into Rumi's eyes. "Because I am searching for a person, not a place." Something inside Rumi shifted. For a brief moment, the noise of the market disappeared. That night, surrounded by books and manuscripts, Rumi could not sleep. Again and again, his thoughts returned to the wandering dervish. Why had such a simple conversation unsettled him so deeply? For years, he had lived among scholars, philosophers, and theologians. Yet one brief encounter with this stranger had disturbed him more than decades of study. And for the first time in many years, Rumi felt something stronger than certainty. He felt hunger. Rumi had spent his life mastering knowledge, but Shams represented something entirely different. He was not interested in information, he was interested in transformation. Most scholars teach people how to think. Shams challenged the very structure of the self that thinks. And that is why his presence affected Rumi so deeply. Because somewhere inside him, Rumi already sensed that intellectual understanding alone could never satisfy the deepest longing of the human heart. After their first meeting, something inside Rumi refused to return to ordinary life. The routines that once gave structure to his days now felt strangely empty. Lectures continued, students gathered, the madrasa remained full. But inwardly, Rumi's attention had shifted elsewhere, toward Shams, toward the unsettling presence of the wandering dervish who spoke as though truth were something alive rather than something to be studied. Rumi invited Shams into his life completely. Days became nights, and nights became endless conversations stretching until dawn. In candlelit chambers lined with books, in quiet courtyards beneath the stars, the two men spoke for hours while the city of Konya slept around them. Something extraordinary was unfolding between them. For the first time in his life, Rumi encountered someone completely uninterested in status, recognition, or intellectual authority. Shams did not care that Rumi was admired throughout Anatolia. He did not care about titles or reputation. He spoke to Rumi as though all outward identity were temporary clothing covering something far more essential. And slowly, through these long nights of sohbet, the old structure of Rumi's life began to loosen. The disciplined scholar who once approached truth through logic and scholarship now found himself drawn towards silence, longing, music, and inward reflection. Students noticed the change immediately. Sometimes Rumi would begin a lecture normally, speaking with his usual precision and clarity. But in the middle of a sentence, he would suddenly fall silent, as though listening to something deeper than thought itself. At other times, he abandoned formal discussion altogether and spoke instead about love, longing, and the mysteries of the heart. His students exchanged uncertain glances. This was not the Rumi they had always known. Even his movements changed. The man who once walked through Konya with measured composure now wandered the streets at night beside Shams, absorbed in conversation for hours without noticing the passage of time. Music affected him differently. Poetry affected him differently. Even silence itself seemed to affect him differently. It was as though Shams had opened a hidden doorway inside him, a doorway Rumi himself had never known existed. But while Rumi awakened inwardly, tension quietly spread around them. Students waiting outside the madrasa grew frustrated as Rumi spent more time alone with the wandering dervish. Friends whispered among themselves in the marketplace. Some believed Shams had bewitched the famous scholar. Others believed he was leading him away from religion, discipline, and responsibility. Even members of Rumi's family struggled to understand the intensity of their connection. Why had this stranger become the center of Rumi's world? Why did the great scholar of Konya suddenly seem indifferent to the things that once defined his life? But what no one around them truly understood was this. Shams was not pulling Rumi away from the truth. He was stripping away everything that prevented him from experiencing truth directly. For years, Rumi had mastered the language of spirituality. Now, through Shams, he was beginning to taste it. And the deeper their conversations became, the more impossible it became for Rumi to return to the person he once was. The transformation had already begun.
Sometimes I feel as though all my learning has brought me only to the edge of something, but not into it. I know scripture, I know theology, I know philosophy. People travel from across the city to hear me speak, and yet, there are moments when I feel unbearably distant from the thing itself. Tell me, Shams, why?
Because knowledge can become a veil, Rumi, a beautiful veil, but still a veil. You have spent your life studying the river from the shore. You have measured its depth. You have described its movement. You have taught others the sound of its water. But you have not allowed the current to carry you away. And truth cannot be reached while standing safely on the shore. The mind loves certainty. It wants definitions, conclusions, boundaries. But the heart awakens differently. The heart awakens when certainty begins to collapse. That is why lovers understand what scholars often cannot. A lover is willing to disappear. A scholar still wishes to remain intact.
Then everything I have built, everything I have become, has only brought me near the door.
Near enough to finally enter. But first, something inside you must die. Not your body, not your mind. The illusion you call yourself, your reputation, your image, your attachment to being admired. You carry these things like armor, but armor protects and separates, and divine love enters only where separation ends.
You speak as though love is destruction.
It is, not destruction of truth, destruction of illusion. People speak of love as comfort, But true love burns. It tears apart everything false. It does not ask, how can I protect myself? It asks, what remains when nothing is left to protect? That is why the path frightens people, because everyone wants enlightenment, but very few want surrender.
And surrender means losing oneself.
No, it means losing what you were never meant to be. You fear disappearing, Milana, but what you call yourself is mostly memory, habit, pride, fear, and performance. You cling to identity the way a drowning man clings to wood. My status, my learning, my importance. But divine love does not care about these things. The beloved tears them away, not to punish you, to free you.
Then why does the heart resist so fiercely?
Because the cage becomes familiar. Even suffering becomes familiar. People prefer known misery to unknown freedom. You have spent your life being praised for your intellect. Now existence asks you for something harder, to enter the fire without knowing who you will become afterward.
Let every certainty I have carried all these years dissolve into ash. Let the scholar disappear. If the scholar is only standing between me and the truth, I have spent my life protecting what I believed myself to be, my learning, my reputation, my understanding, and yet none of these has quieted the longing within me. None of them has brought me fully into the presence I have searched for. So if the path to the beloved requires the destruction of everything false, then let it be destroyed. If the mind must fall silent for the heart to awaken, then let silence consume me. If losing myself is the price of seeing truth, then let me vanish completely, not into death, but into something greater than the self I have known. For the first time, I understand. The fear is not in losing myself. The fear is in remaining the same, and never tasting what waits beyond the walls of this life I have built. So let the fire come, Shams. Let it take everything that is not real, and if anything remains afterward, let that be truth alone.
But while Rumi and Shams grew closer, the hostility around them deepened. Students felt abandoned. Friends grew resentful. Even members of Rumi's family struggled to understand the intensity of their bond. Whispers spread throughout Konya. Some believed Shams had bewitched the famous scholar. Others believed he had stolen him away from the orderly life he once knew. And then, one day, Shams disappeared. Some said he left the city. Others spoke of darker possibilities. History remains uncertain, but one truth is undeniable. His disappearance shattered Rumi completely. For months, Rumi wandered in grief. He searched for Shams in crowded streets, in distant cities, in silence, in prayer. Everywhere he looked, he searched for the man who had transformed his life. But slowly, through longing itself, Rumi began to understand something extraordinary. What he loved in Shams was never only a person. Shams had become a mirror, a doorway, a reflection of the divine presence hidden within himself. And in losing Shams outwardly, Rumi discovered him inwardly. The scholar who once searched for truth in books now found it inside longing itself. Rumi lost Shams, and through that loss, the poet was born. Before Shams entered his life, Rumi already possessed knowledge. But after Shams, knowledge became transformation. Shams did not simply teach Rumi new ideas. He dismantled the identity that prevented Rumi from experiencing truth directly. And from that destruction emerged the voice that would echo through the centuries, the poet of longing, the mystic of divine love, the man whose words still move human hearts today. Perhaps this is why their story continues to affect people so deeply. Because beneath the philosophy, beneath the poetry, beneath the history, it reminds us that sometimes another human being enters our lives not to give us information, but to awaken the sleeping parts of ourselves. Rumi did not lose Shams. He became what Shams awakened within him. If this story moved you and you want to explore more of Rumi's wisdom, divine love, and the spiritual journey that transformed one of history's greatest poets, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. This video is inspired by Dr. Farid Mostaman's 7-book Rumi collection, available on Amazon.